Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, wherever you are in the world. And welcome to my first ever video. I'm Serene the Turtle, and I'm very interested in French and English culture, language, and literature. But I also have a strong interest in football, so of course my first video is about just that, French football. As you all know, USA, Canada, and Mexico just hosted the World Cup, which was, in my opinion, quite controversial, with Balogun's red card being suspended, hydration breaks, and dodgy decisions. I'm sure you're fed up with hearing about it already. However, what I am going to talk about today is something that has circulated on social media in the beginning and also later in the tournament. The fact that France's team has a lot of black players, and to some that must mean they are not French, right? Nah. A lot of misinformation turned into hate speech, as we saw Paraguay Senator Amaria say that Mbappe grew up with coconut milk instead of breast milk, and I'm gonna stop myself because what she said was too disgusting to even repeat. I'm just gonna start off by saying that France's team is absolutely French, and they have one of the most diverse national football teams in the world. To understand why the French national team became so diverse, we have to go further back than the 1998 World Cup. France once controlled one of the largest colonial empires in the world. It ruled territories across North and West Africa, including Algeria, Senegal, Mali, and Côte d'Ivoire, as well as the Caribbean such as Martinique. Even after these countries became independent, the connection to France did not disappear. After the Second World War, many people from France's colonies and former colonies moved to France. Some worked in factories, others came to Sochi to reunite with their families. The children and grandchildren grew up in France. They went to French schools, lived in French cities, and many even entered the French football system. So yeah, many French players today have African or Caribbean backgrounds, but it is not a coincidence. It's a part of their own colonial history. And this story began much earlier than people realize. In 1931, Raoul Diagne, sorry for butchering the name if I do that, I'm really sorry, became the first black player to represent the French national team. He was born in French Guiana and played 18 matches for France, including the 1938 World Cup. So France had a black international player decades before Zidane, Henry, or Mbappe. But Diagne was still more of an exception than the beginning of a fully multicultural team. It was really during the 1980s and 1990s that players with African and Caribbean backgrounds became much more visible in French football. One important example was Jean Tigana. He was born in Mali and became one of the key players in the French team that won the European Championship in 1984. And that is quite relevant because you might think that France is a big nation, they must have won something before 84. Nope. France had formed its national team all the way back to 94. But it took around, I said 1904 by the way, not 94. I'm mumbling a lot. But it took around 80 years before it finally won a major international tournament or competition. Just a few months after winning the Euros, France also won the gold medal at the 1984 Olympic football tournament. Then in the 90s, the national team became more diverse than ever before. Players such as Zinedine Zidane, Marcel Desailly, Lilian Thuram, and Henry became central figures in a generation that would transform French football. And in 1998, France finally won the World Cup. Now we should be a little careful here, because it would be too simple to say that France started winning only because more players from minority backgrounds joined the team. Football success depends on coaching, academies, tactics, and many other things. But the timing is still significant, as the French team became more open to talent from across post-colonial France. Its pool of players grew much larger and more competitive.
Life, I'm too competitive, it's good to be competitive on the field.
Players who might once have been treated as exceptions were now becoming some of the most important members of the team. The diversity of the squad did not just give France better players, it also changed the image of who could represent the country. A French national hero no longer had to fit one traditional image of Frenchness. He could be born in Marseille to Algerian parents like Zidane, or he could be born in Mali just like Tigana, or he could come from one of France's overseas territories. As a matter of fact, the French actually embraced this diversity back when they won their first World Cup in 1998. They called their team the Black Blanc Beurre. Try saying that 3 times real quick. It's more difficult than you think. To those of you who don't speak French, that's okay. It basically means black, white, Arab, which is a play on words of the tricolore. Anyway, politicians and journalists back then actually used this to create something positive instead of the negative anti-immigration news we constantly get. They used it as proof that integration in France was successful. While this, of course, was a good thing, the truth was still something else. You see, on paper, France should not even be a racist country. That sounds odd, right? But hear me out. They have this idea called Republican universalism, which basically means that the state is not supposed to see people as black, Arab, Muslim, or anything else. In the eyes of the Republic, you are simply French. That sounds pretty good, right? Yeah, I guess in theory it does, but unfortunately this also means that the state refuses to recognize race, and when you don't see color, you don't see a pattern. Proud of that one. Pretending not to see race does not make racism go away. People can still be treated differently because of their name, skin color, and so on. When France officially does not want to separate people into racial or ethnic groups, it will also become harder to talk about. And why am I saying all of this? Well, for starters, football shows us exactly how it works. If you are a football fan, I'm sure you've heard of Zidane, a legendary French player who grew up with Algerian parents. He was a beast during the first World Cup win, and became a national hero. He was French, and he represented France as evidence that integration works. This is funny, because just 2 years earlier, the 1996 Euros, the French national team, including Zidane, were criticized for not being French enough. Not all of the players, of course, just those who did not look white or grew up with French-born parents. He did not become more French in 2 years, he just won more games for his national team. People also blamed his headbutt in 2006 on his Algerian roots, and refused to see that action as French. However, it was mostly media like Figaro who did that, and not the actual football fans. A survey told us that 64% gave him, even though he might have lost in the World Cup final against Italy. And I mean 64%, I think that's a lot when you think about it. That man cost you your second World Cup win ever, trophy. So I'm not sure this can be blamed on racism alone, so I'm gonna be careful here because it might not be racism. But Zidane is not the only player who can be a national hero and a villain from another country to their fans. To give you a modern example, Kylian Mbappé, had similar experiences when he in 2021 missed a decisive penalty against Switzerland, and France was knocked out. His own country, that 3 years earlier had celebrated him as the hope of France after they won the second World Cup, turned their backs on him. He received so much racist abuse at just 22 years old that he strongly considered leaving the national team for good. Of course, people used this doubt about playing for France as nothing more than a racist attack, because why would anyone not feel honoured to play for mighty France? He simply could not win, unless he actually won on the pitch, which, unfortunately he did not. People might make fun of him for his English interviews, but when it comes to speaking with French media, he is very clear and well spoken. After the French Football Federation, FFF, defended the football fans who sent Mbappé racial abuse daily on social media, saying that they were just upset about the penalty. Mbappé calmly corrected them by saying this: "It was about racism, not missing a penalty." And this is translated from French. He did not speak English. He did not speak English to the French media. That would make no sense. But yeah, I think Mbappé is what France needs right now. One of the best players in the world who openly speaks up about racism and does not hold back. He did it in 2024 at the Euros, where he said that people should vote against racism and the far right, where he kind of attacked Le Pen there without saying her name. Which of course sparked a new racist discourse, because apparently he was not French enough to speak up about politics. So stupid. But it's how French media and some French people think. But the people who criticized him for this also were never going to change their minds anyway. Other people listened to him. He's a French star that speaks up against strong issues in his home country and uses his voice. Some people will say, just play football, don't be a politician. But I honestly could say the same thing to the football fans who use his race to attack him. Just watch football. And the reason why I'm telling you all of this is because I think it's relevant to why the French team is so diverse and why many people come from backgrounds other than just French. It is easy to think that anyone can be accepted into the French national team as long as they are talented and work hard enough. But the statistics show that the playing field is not quite as equal outside the stadium. A French government study found that people with North African backgrounds were less likely to be invited to a job interview than applicants with traditionally French names, even when their qualifications were similar. Unemployment is also much higher in France's disadvantaged neighborhoods. These neighborhoods are not defined by ethnicity, but many people with immigrant and post-colonial backgrounds live there. So for many French people with African and North African roots, being accepted is not automatic. They may feel that they have to work harder, behave better, achieve more before they are seen in the same way as everyone else. And you can see a similar pattern in football. A white French player can have a bad game and simply be called bad, but when a player with Algerian or Cameroonian, any background that isn't French, makes a mistake, the discussion can suddenly become about his background, his loyalty, his race, whether he really represents France, and so on. This does not mean that every criticism of a minority player is racist. Football should absolutely still be criticized for poor performances, just like everyone else. It's just when the discourse becomes racist, that's when we have an issue. So the problem is that minority players are sometimes expected to prove two things at once: that they are good enough to play for France, and that they are French enough to play for France. That is what makes the success of players like Zidane and Mbappé so complicated. Their careers show that France could offer enormous opportunities, but the reaction to their failures also show that acceptance can still come with conditions. So, what does all of this tell us? Well, the French national team is not diverse by accident. Its diversity is closely connected to France's colonial past, the migration that followed it, also the generations of French citizens who grew up with family roots in Africa, the Caribbean, or other former colonies. And there is no doubt that this has made French football stronger. As more players from different backgrounds became part of the national team, France gained access to a much wider pool of talent. From Jean Digana, Zinedine Zidane, Thierry, N'Golo Kanté, Kylian Mbappé, some of the country's greatest sporting moments have been created by players from post-colonial backgrounds. Football has also helped change the image of what a French person can look like. When France won in 1998 and again in 2018, millions of people celebrated players from very different backgrounds as national heroes. But those celebrations do not mean that racism has disappeared. As we have seen, acceptance can be surprisingly fragile. A player can be completely French when he scores in a World Cup final, but after one bad performance, people may suddenly question his loyalty, or whether he truly belongs. That is probably the biggest contradiction in the story of the French national team. It represents both the success of multicultural France and the problems that France has still not solved. The team can bring people together, but it can also expose the divisions that already exist. So perhaps the French national team should not be seen as proof that post-colonial France has overcome racism. Instead, we should see it as a mirror of modern France, diverse, successful, and capable of creating real unity, but still shaped by a colonial history that continues to influence who is accepted, who is Christian, who has to work harder to truly be seen as French. Because in the end, the French national team does not only represent France today, it also represents the history that created France. Thank you so much for watching this little video. I think France is a really interesting country with so much history that has shaped them today. This was my first video, and if you want, you can give it a like, so I know you'll be interested in more videos about not only this, but other topics I find interesting, and hopefully you will find them interesting as well.